May 16, 1940. United States Congress, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt stood before the assembled legislators and delivered words that would echo across the Atlantic, in translated reports reaching the desk of Adolf Hitler himself. The president's tone was grave. France was collapsing. Britain stood alone. America needed to prepare. His recommendation was specific and staggering. The nation should be geared up to produce 50,000 aircraft annually. The room fell silent. Some congressmen gasped. The number seemed impossible. In 1939, American aircraft production had totaled barely 2,100 planes. 50,000 per year represented an industrial achievement so vast that it violated the physics of production, as everyone understood it. Roosevelt knew what he was asking. He was not merely requesting industrial expansion. He was demanding transformation of the American economy at scales never attempted, mobilization that would require converting automobile factories to warplane production, that would require retraining hundreds of thousands of workers, that would require developing new technologies while producing in unprecedented volumes. The president looked directly at the camera recording his address and repeated the number, 50,000 planes per year. By the end of the war, that number would prove not ambitious enough. In Berlin, intelligence officers translated the address word by word. The numbers reached Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring, commander of the Luftwaffe and Hitler's designated successor. Göring read the transcript, considered the implications, and burst into laughter that echoed through the Reichsluftfahrtministerium offices. The response was reflexive dismissal, born from conviction in German superiority that had seemed justified by German military successes in Poland and France. Göring turned to his staff and spoke with absolute certainty. The Americans were desperate. Their numbers were propaganda designed to intimidate. Democratic nations could never achieve the industrial mobilization necessary to match the efficient German military production. He had visited American factories himself in prior years. American workers lacked precision of German craftsmen. American industry was designed for automobiles, consumer goods, things of lower quality. Warplane production required different caliber of workers, different manufacturing techniques, different standards of precision. Americans could never build fighters and bombers at scales they were claiming. General Ernst Udet, Luftwaffe's Director General of Equipment and hero of the First World War, reinforced Göring's assessment. Udet had studied captured American aircraft, evaluated their design and performance, compared them to German engineering. His conclusion was firm. Americans built adequate machines for their purposes, but German aircraft were technically superior. German pilots were better trained. German industry could produce at acceptable levels even against American competition. The intelligence assessment that reached Hitler concluded that Roosevelt's 50,000 planes per year goal was propaganda designed to frighten the Reich through inflated claims. Hitler himself, in private conversation with his military advisors, acknowledged concern about American production capacity, but dismissed the specific numbers as the typical American boasting, no different from their exaggerated claims about skyscrapers and their Hollywood fantasies. What was vital was that Germany achieve quick victory before American industrial mobilization could accelerate. The longer the war continued, the more dangerous American production would become. But 50,000 planes per year was simply not possible, not even for Americans. The conviction was built on fundamental misunderstanding of American industrial capacity. German intelligence knew that America had been economically devastated by the Great Depression, that unemployment remained high through the 1930s. Observers noted that American factories were underutilized, that the economy was operating well below capacity. What German analysts failed to comprehend was that this condition was precisely the advantage Americans possessed. Factories that were offline could be reactivated. Workers who were unemployed were available to be trained and deployed. American industrial equipment, mothballed during the Depression, could be brought back into production. The Great Depression that had seemed to indicate American weakness had actually created conditions perfectly suited for rapid wartime industrial mobilization. General Helmuth Felmy, commander of Luftflotte II, had visited American aircraft factories in 1938 as part of military exchange program. His report emphasized German superiority of precision and craftsmanship. American workers, Felmy concluded, lacked the training and discipline necessary to build precision instruments like fighter aircraft. American manufacturing prioritized speed over quality, quantity over excellence. German production methods were slower, but produced superior machines. This assessment became foundational to German intelligence evaluation of American aircraft capability. The conclusion seemed obvious. Americans could perhaps triple production if they committed resources entirely to warplane manufacture, perhaps reach 12,000 planes per year if they completely destroyed consumer economy. 50,000 was fantasy. The analysis was thorough, methodical, and catastrophically wrong. William Knudsen, a Danish immigrant who had risen to president of General Motors, received a telephone call in spring 1940. President Roosevelt wanted him to leave Detroit and serve as director of industrial production for the military. Knudsen accepted and agreed to take the position for $1 per year, refusing any substantial compensation for the work. At age 68, Knudsen was legendary in American industry for accomplishing what German observers said was impossible: making efficient production of complex machines compatible with quality standards that met military requirements. Knudsen's presence in the industrial mobilization effort meant that American aircraft production would be guided by someone who understood how to scale production without compromising function, how to establish systems that would permit enormous volume while maintaining quality control. Knudsen immediately began what he called the battle for production. He established priorities, allocated resources, brought automobile manufacturers into warplane production, coordinated between government, military, and private industry. The transformation began with understanding that aircraft production and automobile production were not different in fundamental manufacturing principles. Both involved assembly line techniques. Both required coordination of thousands of suppliers. Both needed standardization and precision at volume. What automobile manufacturing required was mass production, applied to more complex machinery. American automobile industry had pioneered mass production techniques through decades of manufacturing practice. Applying those techniques to aircraft meant abandoning German assumptions about handcrafted precision being necessary for quality warplanes. Ford's Willow Run plant was the symbolic center of American aircraft mobilization. The facility was built on 2 square miles of Michigan farmland. The main assembly building stretched 1 mile long and was called the largest building in the world under single roof. The plant was designed to build B-24 Liberator bombers using automobile assembly line techniques. At peak production, Willow Run was completing 1 B-24 every 63 minutes, around the clock, continuous production that violated German assumptions about aircraft manufacturing, requiring handcrafted precision. The plant employed 24,000 workers, including women and African Americans in positions German racial ideology declared unsuitable for precision work. The combination of assembly line techniques, interchangeable parts manufactured to tolerance standards, and continuous production meant that American factories could produce aircraft at rates that matched German aircraft production in a few weeks. By 1942, American aircraft production had begun climbing toward targets that German observers insisted were impossible. In 1942, American factories produced 47,936 military aircraft, approximately 15 times Roosevelt's 1940 projection per month adjusted to full-year rate. The production was not limited to fighter aircraft. Bombers, transport planes, reconnaissance aircraft, training aircraft, all were being produced in staggering volumes. General Motors was producing aircraft fuselages and components. Curtiss Wright was producing aircraft components. Douglas Aircraft was producing transport aircraft and fighter aircraft in volumes that exceeded German entire wartime production. Consolidated Aircraft was producing B-24 bombers that came off assembly lines with such regularity that some fell to enemy forces intact because logistics could not keep pace with production. 1943 saw production increase to 84,853 military aircraft, pushing toward the 50,000 per year target Roosevelt had called for in 1940. Intelligence officers in Berlin were increasingly troubled by reports confirming that American production numbers in captured documents, neutral observer reports, and reconnaissance photographs were accurate. The photographs showed Willow Run producing bombers continuously. The interviews with captured American airmen confirmed that they were replacing damaged bombers with newly manufactured aircraft, that losses were being made good by production faster than pilots could be trained. The mathematical reality was becoming impossible to ignore. Americans were indeed building vast numbers of aircraft, perhaps not quite 50,000 annually, but numbers approaching that target. By 1944, German military leadership faced undeniable reality that shattered assumptions they had built strategic plans upon. American factories produced 96,270 military aircraft that year, nearly doubling Roosevelt's target from 1940. The number was staggering. German aircraft production that year totaled 39,807 planes, meaning Americans were producing at rates that exceeded German production by factors of 2 to 3. But the critical comparison was not current year to current year. It was cumulative totals. By 1944, American aircraft production since 1941 totaled approximately 320,000 machines. Germany had produced approximately 119,000 aircraft during the same period. The disparity was not due to late-war American mobilization advantage. The disparity was fundamental, systematic, structural. American industry had been producing at rates far exceeding German capacity continuously. The psychological impact on German military leadership was devastating. General Adolf Hitler, commanding officer of German fighter forces, reported to Göring that the mathematics of air war were no longer about tactics or individual pilot skill. American production exceeded German capacity by ratios that made German victories irrelevant. If American fighters outnumbered German fighters by factors of 10 to 1, individual combat superiority meant nothing. A pilot could shoot down 10 American planes and still be outnumbered overall. The attrition mathematics were impossible for Germany to survive. American production would replace losses faster than German production could, meaning that over time German Air Force would be mathematically reduced to nothing, regardless of tactics or technology. Albert Speer, Hitler's Minister of Armaments, received intelligence reports in late 1944 documenting American aircraft production in detail. The reports included data showing that Ford's Willow Run alone had produced more B-24 bombers than Germany had produced aircraft of all types in comparable time periods. The mathematical disparity was so vast that Speer later testified after the war that when he received those reports, he immediately recognized the war was lost. Germany could not achieve production parity with America. It was not a matter of effort or efficiency. It was a matter of industrial scale and capacity. American economy could dedicate resources to aircraft production while simultaneously building tanks, trucks, ships, and weapons in quantities that exceeded German total production. The difference was not marginal. It was civilization-scale disparity. America was fighting with industrial capacity that made Germany's efforts seem trivial by comparison. The aircraft produced by American factories represented industrial philosophy, rooted in mass production techniques. German aircraft were hand-assembled, each machine individually built with precision that required skilled craftsmen. American aircraft were assembly line products, standardized components put together by workers trained minimally, quality controlled through measurement and testing rather than craftsman judgment. The American approach prioritized volume. The German approach prioritized quality. In industrial war, volume proved superior to quality. 10,000 mediocre planes overwhelmed 1,000 perfect planes, because quantity determined outcome more than individual machine capability. The aircraft symbolically represented through the B-24 Liberator. The plane was not the most advanced fighter or most powerful bomber in the war. It had compromises in range and firepower compared to some German bombers. But the B-24 was designed to be built in quantity, designed with parts that could be manufactured in different factories and assembled anywhere. The aircraft was reliable, maintainable, adequate for its purposes. The design philosophy was not perfection but production. The result was that thousands of B-24s flew missions while German bombers were rarer and less replaceable. The American aircraft were adequate enough and available enough that quantity overwhelmed quality through sheer volume. By August 1945, when the war concluded, American aircraft production totaled approximately 295,959 military aircraft. Combined with support aircraft, total American aircraft production reached approximately 325,000 machines. Germany had produced approximately 119,000 aircraft during the entire war. American production exceeded German production by ratios of approximately 3 to 1. The comparison became even more stark when considering that American production was sustaining two theaters of war simultaneously, flying combat missions across the Pacific and Europe, supplying transport aircraft supporting logistics across continents, training aircraft preparing new pilots. German production was committed entirely to single continent and single campaign where it still proved inadequate. The Luftwaffe that had dominated European skies in 1940 had been systematically reduced to impotence not through tactical defeat but through industrial attrition. American fighters did not need to be superior individually. They needed to be available in overwhelming numbers, and that requirement American production met completely. Luftwaffe pilots faced waves of American fighters that kept coming despite losses, that were replaced faster than German pilots could accumulate victories, that represented industrial machine-producing replacement aircraft faster than replacement pilots could be trained. The German miscalculation regarding American production capacity was not aberration but logical consequence of German worldview rooted in racial ideology and assumptions about democratic inferiority. Democratic nations were considered soft, decadent, incapable of mobilizing efficiently. Americans were considered materialistic, individualistic, lacking discipline necessary for coordinated industrial production. The Luftwaffe leadership was convinced that American workers were inferior to German workers, that American engineering was crude, that German precision manufacturing would prove superior in any sustained competition. The belief in German superiority was not mere prejudice but was woven into military planning, strategic assessment, resource allocation. Germany could not mobilize at American scales because only totalitarian systems could achieve such coordination. This assertion was proven false by American industrial mobilization, achieving production targets that exceeded German ability to comprehend when targets were announced. The 50,000 aircraft per year that Göring had, dismissed as propaganda, was actually underestimation of what American industry would achieve. In 1944, American factories were producing 96,000 aircraft annually, nearly double Roosevelt's original target. The production was not planned achievement but exceeded expectations even among American industrial planners. The speed of acceleration was remarkable. In 1940, American aircraft production totaled 6,086 planes. By 1944, production reached 96,270 planes, approximately 16-fold increase in 4 years. The escalation was driven by rapid learning, continuous efficiency improvement, revolutionary technologies like welding procedures that reduced manufacturing time, and enormous capital investment in new factories and equipment. The factories themselves were symbols of American production philosophy. Willow Run, the massive B-24 plant, was purpose-built structure designed to push production volumes beyond what traditional factories could achieve. The single-roof assembly building, the integration of parts manufacturing with final assembly, the continuous flow of components through assembly line created efficiency that traditional aircraft manufacturing could never match. German factories were dispersed, specialized, designed for precision production. American factories were concentrated, integrated, designed for continuous production. The difference in physical plant reflected philosophical differences between German craft-oriented production and American mass production-oriented manufacturing. The captured American aircraft provided German engineers with opportunities to examine production techniques. German reverse engineering teams noted that American welds were often less perfect than German welds produced by hand, yet the aircraft functioned reliably in combat. German engineers recognized that American manufacturing accepted lower standards in some areas, while emphasizing other characteristics like durability and ease of repair. The manufacturing philosophy was different. German precision was not worse than American efficiency. It was different, but different manufacturing approaches produced different results in industrial war. American efficiency produced aircraft in quantities German precision could never match. By 1945, German military leadership had abandoned illusions of matching American production. The realistic assessment was that Germany would be defeated through industrial attrition, regardless of tactical or strategic achievements in individual campaigns. Victories in air combat meant nothing when replacements arrived in numbers that overwhelmed German replacement capacity. Successful tank engagements meant nothing when destroyed tanks could not be replaced because American vehicle production exceeded German capacity. Successful defensive operations meant nothing when enemy could continue advancing because supply lines delivered replacement equipment and ammunition faster than German production could destroy it. The Allied invasion of Normandy in June 1944 was preceded by air superiority provided by American aircraft production. The 8th Air Force and 9th Air Force had thousands of fighters available for escort and ground attack. Production of American industry made available in numbers German fighter force could not match. The Luftwaffe that had dominated 1940 and 1941 had been reduced to rarity by 1944 through combination of casualties and inability to replace losses at rates American production replaced them. The air campaign preceding D-Day was won not through superior tactics or pilots, but through industrial capacity producing fighters and bombers in such overwhelming numbers that even competent Luftwaffe fighter opposition could not deny American air superiority. The recognition of American industrial superiority came to German military leadership. Too late to change strategy, but clearly enough to recognize that victory was impossible. Hitler and his military staff had gambled on quick victory, on German military superiority translating into conquest before American production mobilized. The gamble had failed. By 1942, American production was accelerating. By 1943, American production exceeded German production ratios that made German victory mathematically impossible. By 1944, the reality was undeniable. American factories were producing military equipment at scales that German industry could not match even if Germany committed entire economy to military production. The 50,000 aircraft Roosevelt had called for in 1940 became symbolic, number representing American confidence in productive capacity. German dismissal of the number as propaganda represented failure to comprehend that democratic capitalism could achieve industrial mobilization exceeding totalitarian systems. American industry decentralized, competitive, driven by private firms coordinating through government contracts, proved more effective at rapid expansion than centralized German production. The psychological factors were important. American workers competed for contracts. Private firms innovated to increase production. Competitive market created incentives for efficiency and expansion. German production was centrally planned, controlled, coordinated by military and government officials. The system was organized but less dynamic, less responsive to opportunities for increased efficiency. The aircraft produced were transported across oceans in ships, loaded onto carriers and flown to combat theaters, maintained by ground crews and flown by pilots. The logistics that supported this production were as important as production itself. American aircraft production was not meaningful in isolation, but only as part of integrated system that transported aircraft, maintained them, supplied them with ammunition, arranged training for replacement pilots. German aircraft production occurred within systems struggling with disrupted logistics, damaged factories, limited fuel supplies, difficulty obtaining components. American production occurred within system that was getting better continuously, that was solving problems through engineering innovation, that was learning to produce faster and more efficiently through experience. The comparison ultimately came down to fundamental differences in industrial organization and strategic planning. Germany had assumed America could not mobilize at continental scales, could not coordinate economy-wide production, could not achieve manufacturing standards while also achieving volume. Each assumption proved wrong. America could mobilize. American government could coordinate between military, industry, and civilians in achieving objectives. American manufacturing could achieve precision and volume simultaneously through different techniques than German methods employed. By war's end, the mathematical reality was impossible to deny. American factories had produced approximately 325,000 military aircraft. Germany had produced approximately 119,000 aircraft. The combination of American production capacity and American ability to replace losses in air combat meant Luftwaffe was mathematically reduced to impotence. German pilots fought with courage and skill. Individual German pilots achieved high victory scores. Individual German aircraft like Me-262 jet fighter possessed capabilities exceeding American contemporary designs. But individual superiority meant nothing when facing enemies with 10 to 1 or even 100 to 1 numerical advantage. Provided by American production, the aircraft that rolled off American assembly lines symbolized industrial competition at scale Germans could not match. Willow Run producing B-24s every 63 minutes. North American Aviation producing P-51 Mustangs continuously. Douglas Aircraft producing transport aircraft and attack aircraft simultaneously. The continuous production meant that American Air Force could sustain enormous attrition rates and still maintain superior numbers. German Air Force could not. The mathematical conclusion was inevitable. American production would eventually render Luftwaffe irrelevant through attrition regardless of battlefield successes. Göring's laughter upon reading Roosevelt's production goals in May 1940 echoed as hollow mockery by 1944 as German generals received intelligence, confirming that Americans had indeed built aircraft in numbers approaching 50,000 per year, had built total aircraft that exceeded 300,000 by war's end, had achieved production rates that German industry could not approach even in fantasy. The propaganda that Göring had dismissed had proven accurate. The industrial capacity that German observers had declared impossible had become reality. American factories had produced more aircraft than German generals had believed the entire American nation could build. The difference was not technology or efficiency, but fundamental misunderstanding of what democratic industrial society could achieve when mobilized for total war. The 50,000 aircraft Roosevelt had called for in 1940 became numbers that were exceeded. German generals who had mocked the goal would study actual production totals and recognize that they had fundamentally misunderstood enemy capability, that they had planned strategy based on assumptions about American weakness that were proved catastrophically wrong, that they were fighting a nation whose industrial capacity made German victory mathematically impossible from moment American mobilization accelerated. The aircraft produced by American factories represented industrial superiority that no amount of German tactical skill or individual pilot excellence could overcome. The war was ultimately decided in factories on assembly lines through production of 300,000 aircraft that demonstrated that American industrial democracy could mobilize at scales exceeding German totalitarian planning.